Okay, let's go ahead and get started. If you haven't signed in yet for CPE credit, make sure that you do that. Sign-in sheets are over here on the side. Happy Friday. How is everybody? Good, good. All right. So you are attending the second show of the annual cybersecurity training. So yesterday they were laughing, they were crying, they were on the edge of their seats. So I hope to be able to get to that same level of awesomeness as we had yesterday. It will be a good hour, I guarantee. And yesterday I finished 2 minutes early. So today I'm going to go for 3. Okay? So I'll do what I can. So this session is being broadcast to all the other UHY offices. So people around the country are watching this as well. So welcome. Okay, so let's talk about what we're going to do today. So from the firm's perspective, cybersecurity is a big deal for the firm, that we need to protect the information that we have of our clients. But it's also important that we start thinking about our clients in terms of how can we help protect them, making sure that we have made them aware of the risks and where it's appropriate, if we can help them, figuring out how we can help them, okay? So we're going to spend an hour together today, and we're going to talk about things in 4 different buckets. So the first thing that we're going to talk about, we're going to do some education. So we're going to focus specifically, because we could talk about hundreds of things relative to cybersecurity. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the top 3 risks, okay? So we'll go through that. The next section that we're going to go to is a lot of people are not aware that there actually is a growing body of knowledge for CPAs around cybersecurity. Okay, so for all the client service people that are watching this, there actually is a fair amount of information that has been published by the PCAOB, by the Center for Audit Quality, by the AICPA. So we're going to go through some of those resources and make you aware of those. We won't go into them in detail. We'll touch on what they are and why they're important. And then next week, when the recording of this is posted, all of those will be made available to you, so you can actually go. The links will be included in the slides as well. So that's the second thing that we're going to touch on. The third thing that we're going to go through is the Equifax 7-step action plan, okay? So the Equifax breach happened in September. What happened after that is that me and other members of the cybersecurity team started getting questions from people. What should we do? Is this serious? If so, why? And so what we did is we put together a 7-step action plan that we recommend people implement for themselves, and then also think about your family, your friends, those types of things. Part of what the strategy is when we do cybersecurity training for our clients, and by the way, we can do a version of this training for our clients as well, because many of them, if they're not educating their employees, they should be. So you may want to think about for your clients, what are they doing for an annual cybersecurity training, okay? So the strategy that we use is that if we could make people care about cybersecurity for themselves, then as employees, they're going to be better and more aware employees, which is going to help the company, okay? A lot of times, historically, cybersecurity training has been, don't do this, don't do this, don't do that, that kind of stuff. What we try to do is more focus on, these are steps that you can take. So we're going to talk about the top 3 risks and the dangers, but then we're going to focus on, you can do something about this. This is a risk like any other risk that you can manage. So you need to be thinking about that and on top of that. The last thing that we're going to do, section 4, is going to be, we're going to talk about specifically about things that we are doing as a firm, that UHY is doing from a cybersecurity perspective, okay? So we're going to talk a little bit about that and technology and those types of things. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in. So if the clicker works, there we go. Okay, so one of the things that we also wanted to make sure that you were aware of is that this is an increasingly critical business topic. So from the standpoint of, you know, we have a responsibility with our clients to make sure that they're addressing all of the pertinent risks that they need to be thinking about. Cyber risk is part of that. So if we're not talking about this issue with our clients, I can guarantee you that our competitors are, okay? So in terms of, well, I don't want to talk to my client about this, well, I can guarantee you there are other folks that are out there doing this. Specifically, middle market companies struggle with dealing with cybersecurity because they don't have the internal resources, okay? Larger public companies can throw teams of people at this, hire a lot of external partners, and they can deal with the issue. For middle market companies, it's not that easy. A lot of what they have to do is done with partners, of which we can help and advise them and be one of those partners. And then finally, we've added additional cybersecurity resources to the firm that we're going to talk about later that you can tap into and we can deliver services to your clients, okay? So we're going to go through things in 4 steps. We're going to talk about those top risks, then we're going to go through the CPA's role, 7-step action plan, and then finally ways you can help your clients, okay? So right off the top, how many people in the room have heard about the Equifax hack? Okay, pretty much every hand in the room. Now the second question is this: how many of you have done something about it to mitigate the risk and or have a plan to do that? Okay, this is actually this is about half the room, which is normally we only get about 20% of people that will answer that question that they have done that. So Equifax is a great example, though, of what can happen to an organization when there's a breach. Now, granted, theirs was one of the biggest of all times, but as you can see, it had a dramatic impact on the stock. So the circle is where the breach was announced. The stock immediately plummets. It's now recovered back. But over $5 billion in market cap has been erased for Equifax, okay? But there's a lot of other things that you need to think about too in terms of your clients. Think about the other issues from a regulatory perspective. Now the FTC has launched an inquiry, okay? How many of you heard about the 2 people at Equifax, the 2 executives that sold stock before it was announced to the public? Okay, a lot of you probably heard about that. Now they've done an internal inquiry that has cleared those 2 individuals that they had no knowledge. But to people like you, me, and probably you may not be convinced that you believe the results of that internal panel. So those types of things can have issues and significant business impacts on our clients, okay? So we need to be aware of that and figure out where we should go. Our memories fade, so we've forgotten about some of these that have happened before. The Home Depot breach, the Target breach. For those of you here in St. Louis, you remember the Snooks breach. Anthem, I was affected by the Anthem breach, and I know that because someone in Miami filed and got a $9,200 refund of mine. And so we'll talk more about the impacts of that and how that's impacted, but it's had an impact on my life, unfortunately. And Charter, from a St. Louis perspective, they acquired a company that had a breach. So now, even though it wasn't them, they're having to deal with it. So the pace of breaches is probably not going to slow down, unfortunately. So when you look at 2018, I think we're going to see a continued parade of things like this happening. So why is the Equifax hack so damaging? Why is it such a big deal? Well, 2 things. One is that it was massive. 1/3 of Americans, over 145 million people in America, which is a huge number. However, the other thing is that the type of information, think about the Home Depot hack, some of the other things that have happened. What happened? You just got a new credit card, right? You had to wait, get one in the mail, that kind of stuff. Well, with the Equifax hack, there are things you can't change. It's not as easy as just doing a new credit card and getting it in the mail. Names, social security numbers, birth dates, addresses, driver's license numbers, things that you need to create a new identity that you can't really do, you can't do anything about. Okay, so that's part of the reason why this one is such a big impact compared to some of the other breaches that have happened before. Okay, so now let's talk about those top 3 threats. Okay, so we're going to focus on the big ones that everybody should be aware of and should be able to be conversant about. Okay, so how did we come up with the top 3? Well, this past summer, SANS is a cybersecurity training organization. So they had a conference this summer where all the people that deal with cybersecurity came together at this conference. And so they asked them a question. What is it that has negatively impacted your organization? What are the risks that have manifested themselves that have been a problem? So the top 3 in their survey, number 3 was ransomware. Okay, so we'll talk about ransomware, what that is, what you can do about it, those types of things. Second thing we're going to talk about is spyware, of which the most prevalent example that we'll talk about is a keylogger, okay, which logs all of your keystrokes that you're doing on your computer. And the third one, and the big one, the number 1 risk that's out there is phishing. Okay? So we'll talk about what phishing is, why it's so dangerous, give you some examples, some of those types of things. So those are the three that we're going to focus on. So let's start first by going into phishing, okay? And a lot of what this is from a phishing perspective, it's really nothing new, but it is figuring out ways to trick people to do things that they don't necessarily realize that they were doing. So let's go into this a little bit. So phishing is a real risk because when you trace back in terms of when bad things happen, where did it originate? A lot of that has to do with phishing. So this is sophisticated phishing emails behind more than 90% of successful cyber attacks from a CyberSecurity summit earlier this year. So a lot of the genesis of where things happen trace back to these innocent phishing emails. So what is phishing? Form of social engineering, where basically somebody is trying to cajole you and get some pieces of information that they want to get you to give that up. Could be your user ID and password combination, could be credit card numbers, whatever it is. There are different types of phishing. So phishing is just the general emails that you get that you obviously say, oh, this isn't legit, this is fake. Spear phishing is when somebody's coming specifically after you. So they're not sending millions of these. They've researched, they know who you are and what they want from you, okay? So they're coming specifically after you. Whaling is spear phishing, but going after particularly senior business executives, okay? Such as a CEO. And you're going after a whale, which is why it's whaling. W-2 phishing, this was really big about 18 months ago that we saw a lot of. It used to be that they tried to scam people on an individual basis. Wouldn't it be a lot easier if we just had companies give us all of their W-2s? Which unfortunately is exactly what's happened. We'll look at an example, but there were way too many instances of well-intentioned people that were trying to do their jobs, zipping up and emailing out the company's W-2s for 2016 and 2015. So we'll talk about that. Phishing is doing the same types of things, except by voice. So somebody calling you on your cell phone, trying to get you to give up pieces of information. Smishing, SMS, is text messages. So when you get a text message on your phone. I was actually very proud. My dad called me last week and said, Dad, he said, Dave, I got a text on my phone from the bank. And so immediately my red flag started going off that, oh, this isn't going to be good. And what my dad did was actually really good. He said, so I pulled out my card and I called the number on the back of my card. I was like, look at you, way to go, Dad. He's actually listening to some of the things I'm talking to him about. But those are the types of things that now you really can't tell when somebody's texting you, calling you, who is this really, trying to figure that stuff out. So these are all examples of different forms of phishing. So a lot of what happens from a phishing perspective is that they'll try to get you to act with a sense of urgency and cause you not to think because you're reacting so quickly. So if you look at these are the most clicked phishing email subject lines from the third quarter. So when you look at these, a lot of these have a sense of urgency, something that I care about, whether it's health benefits or banking information. I don't want to screw that up. So you'll notice UPS, we'll take a look at that. Your password expires in less than 24 hours. Urgent, I have to take action. Change of password required immediately. Please read important from human resources. We all don't want to be in trouble with human resources. So that would something that people would jump on. Vacation sick time policy, delivery attempt was made. We all care about packages. Did I order something? I don't know. I think I did, but figuring that out. So these are all the ones that, if you see anything like this, and this is why the education is important, for you to be aware, and when you see one of these, to not immediately respond and say, oh, I'll do it, but to actually have that moment of, is this legit? Probably not. Okay, so here are some examples. So a lot of you will get UPS and FedEx delivery notices, okay? So let's talk about what happens when you click that link, okay? So if you click that link, a couple of things could happen. One would be that it takes you to a website that has malware installed on it that then is downloaded onto your computer, okay? So, and then that gives the bad guys access to your computer, okay? So it could also be an attachment that if you double-clicked an attachment, then that would also run something on your computer which would install some form of malware or something like that, okay? So this one's pretty common and unfortunately pretty effective. Another example, so also when you think about anything related to your finances, so those are things that they will prey on because we all know that if my account is withdrawn, I need to act on it quickly. That sense of urgency is there. So this one, impersonating Bank of America, not legit. Once again, what can you do? Well, for this click here, if you could hover over that and then look in the bottom left window of your browser, and then that will tell you where that link is actually going to take you, okay? So there's a lot of things you can do. Look for typos, look for things that don't make sense. Would Bank of America call you valued customer? Those types of things. So those are ways that you can sniff out whether these are legit or not. So this is an example of the W-2 fraud. We give up a lot of information about ourselves on LinkedIn and Facebook, okay? For example, think about any of your clients. Put the company name and then put HR generalist or payroll into a search in LinkedIn, and you'll get a nice list of all the people at that company that deal with payroll, HR. You can even search for a company name and then HR generalist, and you'll get a list of people who are generally junior in the organization, but have access to a lot of extremely sensitive information, okay? So this one is, please send our W-2 tax documents for all employees to this person at Strategic Tax Consultants. I've CC'd him here. We need these documents for a review ordered by the board. Please send immediately as we are under a time crunch, okay? We unfortunately have seen several clients where an HR generalist has received this email. There's usually something in there such as don't tell anybody because it's a secret contract we're negotiating or something like that. So people will actually leave lunch early, go back to their offices, dutifully take the W-2 files, zip them up and send them out, okay? So this is the kind of thing that you want to make sure this doesn't happen to your clients. We all care about our clients. We don't want bad things to happen. Making sure that their HR people know that they're going to be targeted. Their payroll people, they need to know they're going to be targeted, okay? So part of this education process is critical, and we can play a part in that. Finally, CEO impersonation, business email compromise. So this, you guys have probably all received one of these, which is, hey, we need to do a wire transfer, or we're changing the instructions on this bank account. So this one says, please find enclosed vendor banking instructions for a payment that was supposed to go out in the previous week. I need you to process it immediately. Once again, a sense of urgency. I am busy now, but we'll give you a call within the hour regarding the payment. Okay, so what are you likely to do? And this is where it's the human element that's part of this. Okay, well, this is the CEO. I want to impress the CEO that I'm responsive. So what would you do? Wouldn't you go ahead and do the work, just waiting on the call for the final authorization? And if you go ahead and do the work, maybe you forget that the CEO was going to authorize it, and you went ahead and pushed it out anyway, okay? So figuring out how to play on the human element is one of the things that these guys have gotten really good at. This is actually over the latest statistics from the FBI. This is over $6 billion in losses have come as a result of these types of scams. So it is significant. So what can you do at UHY? If something comes in and it seems odd, what should you do? Well, what IT wants you to do is they want to know about it, okay? So, the path to do is to contact the IT help desk. You can email. If you just type in support, it'll pop up and say, and support will be there. You can also call the help desk, or you can call the internal extension. Also, it's on the point if you want to have access there. But they don't care. In fact, they want to see those emails, okay? One of the examples of something that happened last week is that I got an email, and it looked good. It looked legit. But it was from a firm that I didn't recognize, but it was here in St. Louis. And so I'm thinking, I'm going through thinking about it, and moments later, I get an instant message from David Barton in the Atlanta office. And he said, hey, do you know these people? Because they just emailed me, and I think it was supposed to go to you. So immediately, what did we know? We're being targeted, okay? Because multiple people in the organization are getting the same email. And it did have an attachment that, if double-clicked, would have done bad things to our computers, okay? So those are the things that IT wants to know about. If you get something and it doesn't seem legit, it may be coming into others in the organization, so we need to make sure that we let them know that so that they can take the steps necessary to protect us, okay? And our clients should have a mechanism for this as well. What should they do if an employee gets something that they don't know what to do and how to handle? There's got to be a process in place for that to happen, okay? So that's phishing, okay? Now we're going to jump over and talk about the second risk, which is spyware, of which we're going to talk about keyloggers. Okay, so What is spyware? What is a keylogger? So it's software or hardware that's extremely hard to detect, okay? A lot of these software applications will run in invisible mode, okay, for troubleshooting purposes, or maybe you want to keep an eye on your kids. So there are legitimate reasons why these exist, but of course they're used for nefarious purposes 98% of the time, okay? So what does it do? It collects information about your surfing habits, your browsing history, personal information, such as your credit card numbers. We'll take a look at an example. It then takes that information, then passes it to criminals via the internet without you knowing. A lot of these, they will take every 2 hours, they'll generate a text file of everything that you've done, and then it will email that out without you knowing every 2 hours. It's a type of spyware that records your individual keystrokes and mouse clicks. And we'll take a look at what the output of a keylogger is and why it's so dangerous. It can also be a hardware device as well. So that's why physical security is still important, okay? Who has access to our office space? Because could somebody plug something into one of our computers and then the next night maybe pick it up, take it back? So, and then if you live in the Mac world and you think you're protected, you may be a little bit less risky than on the Windows side, but there are still things that specifically target the Mac environment, okay? So I'm going to skip this one until we talk about these other two. This is some feedback that I got yesterday, okay? So this is, you can download, if you go to your computer and you go to Google and you type in download keylogger, you will literally get millions of hits of software that you can download. You can get tools like this for $39 via the internet. It's all plug and play. You think about used to be a hardcore hacker with a hoodie in the basement that's doing this stuff. Now you can look at it. I mean, it's got buttons where you can just click and figure out where do you want to do this, where do you want it to be sent, those types of things. There's also the hardware aspect, okay? If you look at this picture up here, you'll notice that if you can plug this in between your keyboard and or your mouse and the computer connection, basically it's in the middle and it just records everything, okay? So now let's go back. So, and you can buy it on eBay. This one's $31 on eBay. If you want it in 2 days and you want to get it from Prime, you can spend $59 and get it from Amazon, see how it's rated. So let's go back and look at what does the output look like, okay? So this would be the output of a text file of what a keylogger would capture about what you do at your computer, and you can see why it's so dangerous, okay? So what'd you do? The first thing you came in and you opened Explorer, then you went to Firefox, you opened a private browsing session, so it's capturing every click of all the things that you're doing. Then as you go down here, you're gonna open a Gmail, you're gonna start doing an email you're going to send. So here's the text of the email that you end up sending. Down here, how are you going to pay for it? Or here's your credit card number that you keyed in. Okay? So this is an example of why it's so dangerous, because at the end of the day, and then what have the criminals done? Well, now they've written programs to go in and they'll parse through all of this information and pull out a list of where you've put in user IDs and passwords, and then it will just say, I've taken all of this, maybe 7 days worth of information, and here's what I've pulled out of it, okay? And then these are the person's user ID and password combinations. So you can imagine why this is so significant and so dangerous if somebody has that type of information, especially if they're able to do this for a long period of time so they can gather a significant amount of information. So this was announced on Monday. HP on Monday announced that 460 of their laptops actually have a keylogger installed on them. How's that for great news? So if you're wondering why HP allowed a keylogger to ship on their laptops, it's a simple oversight. It was originally installed with a software driver to act as a debugging tool, checking for errors in the software. It was disabled, but it was never removed, okay? And they've been shipping this on over 460 laptops. Different models. So millions of laptops have gone out with this. So, this stuff is hard, you know, in terms of these types of things happen. So you have to figure out how can you protect yourself, and that's what we're going to talk about later. Okay? So that's keyloggers. Now we're going to go into the third topic, which is ransomware. Okay? Probably everybody's heard about companies that have been that have ground to a halt and they've had to pay the ransom in order to get access back to their computers again. Okay, so let's talk about that. So what is ransomware and how does it work? Okay, generally a user clicks an attachment in an email, probably phishing, or clicks through to a website containing the encryption malware. The malware is downloaded onto the computer. It immediately takes control and begins encrypting all of your data and possibly other connected data, which requires an electronic encryption key to unlock. So guess who's the only one that has the encryption key? The criminals, the bad guy, okay? If you want it, you'll have to pay for it. So here are some examples of types of ransomware. These are things that you never want to see in your life. So you'll notice they have things in here in terms of, there's often time limits. If you don't do this within 24 hours, your stuff will be lost forever. Those types of things. So you can see different flavors of this as this has kind of evolved over the year. This one's from 2013. Then this is an example of the WannaCry. You can notice they're getting better in terms of explaining what's going on. Here's how you can pay the ransom. A lot of focus on customer service with these guys. It's interesting. And here's how you pay in Bitcoin to this address and how you send them the money. So, and this is Petya, which is a very simplistic, you're in trouble if you see this. So they want you to pay by Bitcoin because you can't really trace it, okay? So there's instructions on how to pay by Bitcoin. If any of you have followed what's been happening with Bitcoin in the last couple of months, it's now some ridiculous amount. Some are speculating that there's a bubble in Bitcoin, which it quite possibly could be. So anyway, but this is how you can, they want to show you how easy it is to get your stuff back, okay? So unfortunately, we do have clients, and actually we just saw an email last week from a cloud small business accounting hosting provider that admitted to their clients that they had to pay the ransom, okay? Which I had really never seen, and their website went dark for 24 hours. So it was very interesting. But when you think about ransomware, what is the number one thing that you can do to protect yourself from ransomware? Any ideas? Backup. So having a backup is key. So and I talk to this with my friends and family. If you have like wedding pictures or baby pictures and you don't have those things in multiple places, please, please, please make a backup. If you're a business, not only do you want to have the backups, you also have to do the next part, which is test the backups and make sure that you can do a restore from the backups, okay? So there's a business aspect to this, but there's also a personal aspect to this as well, okay? All right. So those are the top 3 risks that we're going to talk about, okay? So that's more of the education side of things. Now we're going to transition over and start talking about resources, okay? These are resources that are available to CPAs, and I just included this in here so we could go through them quickly. You'll see them in more detail if you want to look at them next week, okay? So every year the Center for Audit Quality, they put out hey, as you're preparing for your audits, these are things you need to be thinking about. So one of the things that they have in there in this year's that was released in October is a section about cybersecurity risks, okay? So here that is blown up so you can actually read it. So, things in terms of cybersecurity risks that may pose a risk of material misstatement to the company's financial statement. PCAOB inspection staff also seek to understand whether modifications to the engagement team's risk assessment and planned audit approach occurred or were necessary in response to cyber risks, okay? So this is something that we need to be thinking about more as we go forward. Another example, the PCAOB back in November announced their observations from their audits in the 2016 cycle. There also is a section here on cybersecurity. So there's a whole thing. I'll focus on this section here. It is important for auditors to consider whether there are cybersecurity risks that pose risks of material misstatements to the financial statements, and if so, whether modifications to the planned audit approach, including for testing IT general controls, are necessary. Okay? So as we think about cyber risks and the things that we need to get our hands around, this is one of those things that we need to be thinking about. This was an article that was in Accounting Web back in June, and it specifically focused on why, when you look at everybody that's out there, which is the right group of people to focus on cybersecurity? The answer that they came to was CPAs, okay? The three things that they cited of strengths of CPAs, we have core values and attributes. Second one is experience in independent evaluations. We've done this before, in multidisciplinary strengths, and that we can understand how things fit within the broader picture, okay? So there are examples of other things like this that are out there. This was an article from the Journal of Accountancy in the month of October. This was specifically about something new that the AICPA has created, okay? So SOC 1, SOC 2 reports used to be called SAS 70 back in the day. So those are there. They've actually come out with a new one specifically for assurance around a company's cybersecurity program, okay? And so it's called SOC for cybersecurity. Next year in 2018, they're coming out with one, SOC for supply chain, okay? So we're looking at these and trying to figure out how is this going to affect our client base, what are the new opportunities that are there, and things that we should be thinking about, okay? Cybersecurity regulations. One of the things that we're monitoring is that in the state of New York, the New York Department of Financial Services has been the first entity to pass required cybersecurity regulations, okay? If you're a financial services institution, you want to do business in the state of New York, you have to comply with these cybersecurity regulations. The good thing is that they're actually good. When you read them, it's like, well, yeah, every company should be doing these things. So there's a core group of about 12 things, and we're monitoring that to see if that gradually becomes the de facto standard for what companies should do, okay? We're also looking at how other states may adopt what New York has done, okay? So those are things that we expect to see play out in 2018. AICPA issued an introduction to cybersecurity, so if you're looking to get just the basics of cybersecurity, this is out there and available. There's also a cybersecurity toolkit that they made available, and there's basic tools that are in there, services CPAs can provide, how to help your clients, those types of things. So that's a resource that's available to you. This was something that Accounting Today put out in November. And this is specifically focused on CPA firms. So what should CPA firms be doing? So one of the things as part of this, they interviewed me and they actually took the 6 things that I outlined and put it into the document. So, you know, everything should start with a risk assessment, actually having a formal cybersecurity program. Tap into expertise. If you don't have this knowledge within your organization, find somebody that does. Educate your employees, which is what we're doing here. Test your defenses, and then CPA should start reaching out to clients to create general and broader awareness of cyber risks and how to prevent them, okay? So that's available for download as well, okay? Okay, so that is the first 2 chunks, okay? So now we're gonna go into, and we're gonna talk about, this is where hopefully you will get a lot out of this in terms of, we're going to cover a 7-step action plan that we developed specifically after the Equifax breach, okay? So we're going to go through, we're going to talk about that, and then we're going to finish talking about some things that are happening with the firm, okay? So one of the things, why is this an opportunity? And I wrote an article on LinkedIn in October, November. One of the things I talked about was, why is this an opportunity? Is it a really bad thing? Absolutely it is. But what is the opportunity? The opportunity is that people that never cared about cybersecurity now care and may be motivated to actually do something when before you couldn't get them to act, okay? So that's why this is an opportunity both for companies and for individuals. So this is the 7-step action plan that was developed specifically in response to the Equifax breach, okay? So these are the 7 steps. And we'll go through these at a high level, and then we're going to go through these one by one, talk about specific examples so you can get a feel what this is like. After this training, you will also receive a 2-page document that summarizes each of these 7 steps, and that you're free to share with your family, your friends. If clients are interested, go ahead and it's available for them. So first thing, determine if your information was exposed in the hack. Then, how do we make sure and protect our authorized accounts? Well, establishing a process to review your bank and credit card activity. Step number 3, how do you prevent unauthorized accounts from being created? Well, if you're reviewing your credit reports, you're going to detect if something like that happens. Step number 4 is 2-factor authentication. We'll talk about that, what that is and why that is so powerful. 5, use a password manager instead of reusing the same passwords over and over. So we'll talk about a couple of examples of password managers and how advantageous they can be to use. Step number 6 is to look at and consider credit freezes. You can get a lot of comfort by doing credit freezes. We'll talk about that. And then the last one is prioritize filing your taxes. And there we'll talk about my story where unfortunately I had somebody file my taxes on my behalf and why filing before the bad guys is so important, okay? So now let's go through each of these steps, okay? So this is the site that Equifax set up to check if your information was exposed. So unfortunately, they should have created a website off their Equifax.com website, but they created this one, which looks completely like somebody that would create and make something up that would try to trick you. It would look exactly like that, okay? So when I went in, what you have to do is you have to put in the last 6 digits of your social, and then it will tell you if you were affected or not, okay? When I did this, I have 4 children and my wife, so the 6 of us put this in. 4 of us were, 2 of us weren't. Okay, so then I tried to figure out, okay, so the 4 of us that were, I should take the trusted ID thing that they're offering, which is the credit monitoring for a year or 2. So you should do that. But then I started thinking about, well, for the 2 members of my family that weren't affected, do I feel any better that they weren't in this one? Because I know they're going to be in the next one, okay? So then I started thinking about, really, whether or not you're affected in this, you should really do all of these steps. Because if you're not in this one, you're going to be in the next one. Okay? So this is the way that you can do the first step, which is to check to see if your information was exposed. So now let's go to number 2. Okay, so step number 2, establish a process to review your bank and credit card activity you have authorized. One of the interesting things that is happening is that the younger generation has a much higher degree of trust in banks, financial institutions, and retailers than older Americans do. Okay? So when I ask a group of people that are 50 or older, how many of you reconcile your bank accounts to the penny every month? A lot of hands go up. How many of you take your Amex statement and actually track every single one of the expenses over to your expense report? Pretty much every hand goes up. When I ask those same questions to people that are 30 or younger, I get a dramatically different answer. I get my credit card statements. Sometimes I look at them, sometimes I don't. Okay? So we are gradually losing the discipline of reviewing all of our banking activity. So what can you do about that? Because this is really where bad things happen. When you look at where 90% of these types of things happen, we're all concerned about the next step, which is somebody stealing my identity and creating unauthorized accounts. But really what happens is that a lot of times they slip stuff through you on your existing accounts. Okay? So what can you do? First thing, inventory your accounts. Figure out where are all the banks, what all credit cards do I have. Make sure you understand that. Then establish online access, okay? So you can see and monitor the activity that's happening in those accounts. Then what you could do, create an Outlook calendar reminder every 1 to 2 weeks. Put something out there for 15 minutes. I'm going to log in and check my accounts just to make sure nothing weird is going on, okay? Are there other ways to accomplish this? Absolutely. For example, most credit card providers will have a service where you can give them your mobile phone number and they will text you any transactions over a certain amount, okay? Maybe that's $100, maybe that's $500. You can also set it to 0. So you can get alerted every time there's a transaction on your account, okay? So these are all ways that you can monitor and keep an eye on your existing accounts, okay? Now let's go to step number 3. Which is, now let's focus on unauthorized accounts. How do we prevent that from happening? So establish a process for reviewing your credit reports to detect accounts created without your authorization, okay? Most of us know that each of the credit agencies will give you 1 free report per year, okay? So when you think about that, what process can I put in place to make sure this happens? So you get this 1 free report every year. So what you can do is you can put on your Outlook calendar a reminder to request and review a free report every 4 months, okay? So how would this work? Well, maybe the first of the year, you're going to request your TransUnion report, and you're going to review it, which is an important next step. Getting it is the first step. Actually reviewing it is the second step. So maybe you do that January 1st. Then May 1st, you're going to pull your Experian report, and you're going to look at that one. Then September 1st, you'll pull your Equifax one, okay? And then just continue to repeat this. There are a lot of other services that automate this. Discover has some free notification stuff that they're doing. Credit Karma is a service that will also alert you when anything happens in your credit reports. So there's lots of ways to do this, but figuring out a way that you can feel comfortable that nothing is happening without your knowledge, okay? So that's step number 3. Step number 4. 2-factor authentication. How many of you have heard of and are using 2-factor authentication? Okay, good. In this room, it's about half the room. Okay. What we're seeing is that basically for so long, it's just been user ID and password. Okay. And that's not good anymore because it's too easy for somebody to find out your passwords. So two-factor authentication, we're finding more and more organizations that support two-factor authentication, okay? So this is just an example of, and most email providers, financial services institutions, retailers have a two-factor authentication solution. So what is two-factor authentication, okay? So when you think about it, what are the two factors, okay? Factor one is something you know, which is usually your password, okay? So that's the thing that you remember. What's the second factor? The second factor is something you have. What's the thing that within the last 10 years we all now have? Mobile phones, okay? So if a bad guy gets my password and he tries to log in as me, okay? Then what happens? My phone buzzes that I either need to, within an app, I need to authorize it, or they're going to send me a 6-digit code. If that wasn't me that logged in, that person's not getting that, so they won't be able to take this next step to ultimately log in, okay? So that second factor, so let's look at some other examples of this. So you can also set particular parameters. So this is in my bank account, and if anybody is in my bank account, they try to create a new payee. So they're going to write a check to somebody or transfer money to somebody. Well, when they do that, that may be nice and all, but then it'll say, we're going to send you a code, okay? So you have to enter the 6-digit code that we're going to send you on your mobile phone before we will allow you to create a new payee, okay? So these are additional controls that you can put in place. Here's another example. So whenever I log in at chase.com, it says, great, Dave, we're happy to see you. We just sent you, I think there's 7 digits. You have to put it in here, okay? So that's the only way that I can get access to my accounts. This is an example of LastPass. They will also do 6-digit codes, but you have to have the phone enabled to do that. So this is the something that you have part of the equation. The password that you remember is something you know. The mobile phone is something you have. Okay? So, I bring you good tidings of great joy from UHY IT. There is some password news. So, coming in 2018, John Neal asked me to share this with you. So what do we do now? We force password changes every 90 days. Okay? What happens? How many of you possibly are guilty of perhaps writing down those passwords? Possibly. How many of you reuse passwords? That happens too, okay? So what's going to happen now is that you're not going to have to change your password every 90 days. What is happening and what is evolving is that the ridiculous thing that we've created where you have to have certain number of caps and lowercase, and you have to use wild characters and this kind of stuff, none of us can do it. We can't do it anymore. So what do we do? What do we want you to do instead? We want you to create a really good password, generally a passphrase, okay? Something that's meaningful for you, okay? So maybe all I want for Christmas is you. I'm going to capitalize the U and I'm going to use a 1 instead of I, okay? That's easy for me to remember. I won't have to change it for the next year, okay? So if you're going to create passwords and you're not going to change them, what's important? You cannot tell anyone your password, okay? Because that is your line of defense. Okay? So, and that includes UHY IT, okay? They're not supposed to ever ask for your password, okay? So, this is coming, I think it's first quarter, second quarter 2018. But passwords have been a problem for all of us and they're not getting any better. 254. 254. What is that number? I didn't know either. That is the number of things that I have stored in my LastPass vault, which is my password manager solution, okay? So, but Dave, you're a tech guy, you're online all the time. What does the average person have that they're trying to remember? 130 accounts. And each of you are probably trying to do this, and you don't even realize that it's gotten that out of control. Because last night I ordered pizza. My parents were in town. I ordered them pizza from Papa John's. What did I have to do? Create a user ID and password for papajohns.com. I have one for Domino's, I have one for Emos, I have one for everything. So you think about that and how many accounts and how painful it is when you have to reset your password. Oh crap, on this site, what did I use for I don't know. We all have this little algorithm that we try to do. I'll use the site's name and then I'll put a number and a password. It's gotten out of control. You really can't do it anymore. You have to rely on technology to help you with it, okay? So, instead of reusing your passwords, what should you use? You should use a password manager, okay? So this just came out, PC Magazine just put this out. Every year they do an update of this, and these solutions have gotten a lot better. As you can see, there are a lot of solutions and they're not very expensive, okay? So the two that we're going to talk about, this came out last week, the two that we're going to talk about that are most popular are Dashlane and LastPass, okay? So let's talk about what these are and what they do for you. So here's an example when I log into LastPass, okay? If I want to go, this is basically my landing page. So I go to my browser, I put in lastpass.com, I enter my user ID and password. That's hard. It's a passphrase that only I know. Then what happens? They either send me a code or they ask me to authenticate via their app. Only once I do that do I have access to my vault, okay? So now in my vault, this is where I have the 254 password combinations stored, okay? So let's say I want to go to Fidelity, check my 401k, something like that. All I have to do is click here, it launches a new browser window, opens it up, automatically logs me in, okay? I don't have to remember a user ID and password. Guess what happens when the kids call me and ask what the Netflix password is? I have no idea, and I don't care, because I only have to remember one password, which is my master password. So for the kids, LastPass for families, I allow them to have access to my vault, but only for certain accounts, okay? So there's a lot of ways that are emerging for how you can do this, which is a lot better than how it used to be, okay? What can these solutions do for you? They can automatically log you in, as you see what's happening here. They can store your addresses, they can store your credit card numbers, all in the secure vault. They can also generate passwords, okay? So they generate crazy gobbledygook passwords, which I don't care because all I have to do is log into LastPass and then that takes me through to whatever I need to get to. So one of the questions from yesterday was, Dave, doesn't it freak you out that all your stuff is somewhere? Well, yes, I occasionally have, oh my God, I've got everything in my entire world is in there, okay? So, but what have I done? So I've added two-factor authentication. So not only do I have to know the user ID and password, they also have to contact me. The other thing that is significant is that guess what happens if I lose my LastPass password? That's it. It's encrypted. So my vault is encrypted. If I forget the encryption key to unlock which is my password, I have no more access. Okay? So that gives me comfort that if a bad guy were to get into LastPass, they couldn't do anything with it either because they don't know my password. Okay? So is there risk? Yes. But once again, the more educated you become and can figure this stuff out, the better you'll feel. Okay? Step number 6, 2 more to go. Credit freezes. What did credit freezes used to be? An awful, awful process where you would dial an 800 number, sit on hold for 45 minutes, somebody gets on the line which may or may not speak English, then you try to communicate with them about what you're trying to do, at which point they hang up on you, and then you have to call back in and get in the queue and do it again. This process used to be all voice-based, and it was awful, okay? What have they done now? Well, now it's minimal cost to freeze and unfreeze, and it's available online, not just by phone, okay, from the 3 major credit agencies. So these are the links where you can go in and freeze your credit. And you can also call, if you want to call, you can do that. So what are the downsides of this, besides the minimal cost and the time it takes to do it? Okay? The downside is that you have to unfreeze it. So when you're in Macy's and you're buying $1,000 worth of stuff and they're going to give you $200 off if you sign up for their credit card, you can't do it because your credit's frozen, okay? Not only you can't do it, but the bad guys can't do it either. Okay? So this can give you lots of credit. I was actually contacted through a friend of mine by a Missouri state representative who wants to make it law that kids, when they are born in the state of Missouri, their credit is automatically frozen. Only once they reach the age of 16 or 18 is it unfrozen, which makes total sense because why would a 7-year-old need credit? okay? But unfortunately, right now, if you can figure that out, you can access their credit, which can be a real problem once kids become of age, they want to get their first credit card, and they realize that somebody's been living their life for the last 10 years using their credit, okay?
Credit score at all, or they know that?
I don't think it affects your score. All right, okay. So this is the last one, filing your taxes. File your tax return before the bad guys do. So since that guy 3 years ago beat me to file my taxes, and he got the $9,200 refund in Miami, when I've lived in the Midwest my entire life, why the IRS believes that I would move to Miami and claim a large refund, I have no idea. But now, every time I try to file, I get the pleasure of going and visiting the IRS. So I either choose downtown or Chesterfield. I choose Chesterfield. Then I go through the metal detector, I sit in the uncomfortable chairs, I wait 45 minutes, somebody sees me, I show them some returns, they check a couple numbers, and then we're through. So it is a huge pain, okay? So being able to avoid it, file your tax return before the bad guys do, okay? So what can you do? If you're getting a refund, you can get your refund. If you owe, you don't have to pay until April 15th, okay? What can you do now? So for your clients that have, normally they call and schedule an appointment with you, go ahead and schedule that now so that they feel the pressure to get ready for that appointment and get in earlier. You can also sign up for electronic delivery of your tax documents so you don't have to wait for them to come in the mail, okay? So these are things that you can do. So those are the 7 steps, okay? Hopefully that helps. You'll get a document that's got a little bit more information about it. But we've had and I think if you go through and you follow these 7 steps, at the end of the day, you're going to be a lot more protected, and I hope you'll feel better than how you do now, okay? So last 5 minutes, what we're going to do, we're going to talk about ways that you can help your clients, okay, as it relates to cybersecurity. So, as we mentioned before, cyber risk is just another risk that our clients have to deal with, so figuring out how to advise them. If we're not talking with them about it, I can guarantee you our competitors are. Middle market companies don't have the internal resources, and we have people here at the firm, myself and many others, that can work with our clients on this topic, okay? We are continuing to build out our capabilities in the technology space, okay? So when you look from a consulting perspective, digital transformation led by Cindy Hannafy in Atlanta, growing group there. There's other things that we can do, technology strategic planning. I can help clients with virtual CIO. From a risk management perspective, we can help them with this training to create awareness amongst their employees. It's also a great one because it's low cost. We do 2 presentations, give them the material customized for them for $3,200, okay? And so that's something that we can do, help them with business continuity, disaster recovery, and then also we can help them build out cyber programs, okay? A lot of times what we find is that and you go back 18 months or so, we would do a cyber risk assessment, leave, tell the client a bunch of things they need to do, come back a year later, guess what? They didn't get anything done. Okay? So now we're becoming more aggressive to how can we help you actually deal with these risks. That's one thing to tell you what the risk is. It's another thing to help you mitigate it. Okay? So that's something that we can do. This is just a sample of some of the leaders around the firm that can help with cybersecurity. Behind this team is a large number of people that can help clients and we can serve needs. We're helping clients right now with policy issues, doing penetration testing, vulnerability scanning, serving on steering committees. So there's things that we can do, and obviously we have to be careful if it's an audit client. There are certain things that we can't do, certain roles we can't take. But you know, for you guys, call any of us, okay? You don't have to know, oh, if it's this type of opportunity, I'm going to call this person. Just call any of us, and we will get you connected with the right resources for that particular need, okay? So what's the call to action coming out of today, okay? What we'd like each of you to think about is pick 2 of your clients that you'd like to have a conversation with about cybersecurity, okay? And it can be as simple as something like this. Hey, I just attended our annual training. I actually learned a lot in the session. I laughed, I cried, it was beautiful. I don't consider myself a cyber expert because a lot of people are uncomfortable to talk about this, okay? It's okay to not be the ultimate expert. Even I don't feel like an expert because things change so rapidly. I don't consider myself an expert, but I want to make sure you have this risk covered. Can we grab lunch? Schedule some time on the calendar to discuss this, okay? So, what are the takeaways from today, okay? First thing, be aware of those top 3 risks, okay? So when you think about phishing, which is the big one, then you've also got keyloggers, you got ransomware, okay? What's the second thing? Execute the Equifax 7-step action plan. Go back to the Nike swoosh that's on that list. Just do it. It's probably been on your list. One way, somebody talked to me yesterday after the session and said, oh, the password manager thing sounds great, but I don't want to have to enter, 100 passwords. You don't have to. Just start using it, and then every time you log in to a new site, it'll say, hey, I noticed you just logged into this account. Would you like us to save this in your vault? Yeah. And then gradually over time, I didn't start by putting in 254 accounts in my password manager. Just over time, every time I do one, I just add it to my vault. And then I don't have to remember it anymore. Number 3, pick 2 clients to introduce and talk about cyber risks, okay? If we help our clients, that's great. But if we don't, and they still get this message and good things happen, then ultimately that's good for us, that's good for them, okay? All right, that clock's fast, so I think I'm 3 minutes early, as I pledged. Any questions in the 3 minutes we have together? And like I said, I'm available. Any of those other folks are available to answer any questions that you have.
So what do you do when you forget your password?
You don't forget it. Because if you do, you're dead in the water. So,
There's no other process?
No other process. There's no way to get it back. There is, like with LastPass, there's like an 18-digit code that they call it like your safe deposit password. So you take that, put it in your safe or your safety deposit box, and then it'll let you in, and then they'll ask you a bunch of questions. But if you don't do that, you're screwed. You're dead in the water. So, okay. Thank you all. Have a great holiday season, and thank you much.